I like how KJP makes me feel. She gives me confidence that I could do that job. Former Biden press secretary Karine Jean-Pierre announced that she's writing a tell-all book about the Biden administration. In response, people are saying, thanks, but I just wanted a Big Mac. And when Joe Biden was asked if he's going to read the book, he replied, over my soon-to-be dead body.
She walked into that press briefing thinking it was business as usual until Greg Gutfeld flipped the script and turned her day into a primetime roast. One moment, Karine Jean-Pierre was dishing out classic White House word salads. The next, she was the main course at a comedic cookout. Gutfeld didn't just challenge her narrative, he flamed it with style. Picture a press secretary trying to stay poised while punchlines sharper than her stiletto heels fly like confetti. This wasn't just a fact check, it was stand-up meets showdown. If you've ever wanted to watch political theater collide with savage satire, buckle up. This segment doesn't just push boundaries, it dances on them.
All right, so Karine Jean-Pierre wrote a book, and her fans are already sharpening their crayons. And it's just what we need, a tell-all from the woman who spent 2 years telling everyone that Joe just had a cold and not rigor mortis. If the title hadn't already been taken, it should be called Art of the Sea.
Karine Jean-Pierre steps into the press briefing room each day like she's starring in an off-Broadway production titled Deflect, Distract, and Derail, The Tap Dance Chronicles. Only this version skips the choreography and replaces it with cue cards, a prop binder, and the rhetorical grace of a sock puppet fumbling through a Jeopardy episode. It's less press briefing, more improv comedy with political spin delivered like she's guessing the answers instead of knowing them.
She also says she's leaving the Democratic Party. I say God bless her. Not many people have the patience to wait in a line that long. In her book, she says the White House was broken. This after 2 years along a president who wasn't housebroken. But she only realized this after she stopped getting paid to defend it. But like Jake Tapper's book, it's a new genre of Biden tell-alls that should be subtitled, I had no idea because I'm severely retarded.
At this point, watching her attempt to spin the facts feels like watching a house cat thrown into a swimming pool, panicked, unconvincing, and absolutely not built for it. The chaos is real, the purpose unclear, and the denial, Olympic level. Greg Gutfeld didn't even need to go full throttle, he simply arched an eyebrow, and she crumbled like a dollar store candle under a cheap heat lamp. This wasn't a clash of ideas. It was a mercy roast disguised as commentary, and she walked straight into it.
She realizes she was carrying water for a man whose brain was as wet as his pants. Remember, this is the same broad who stared America in the face and said this.
Comments were made in that report about that, obviously about his memory that we don't believe lives in reality.
80's the new 40, didn't you hear? He is as sharp as ever.
They are cheap fakes video. They are done in bad faith.
And it's not true, right? The president wasn't wandering.
Is anyone in the White House hiding information about the president's health or his ability to do the job day to day?
Absolutely not.
He's the president of the United States. You know, I can't even keep up with him.
Let's be real, Karine Jean-Pierre has become the human equivalent of that automated customer service voice that politely ignores your screams for a real person. You know, the one, your call is important to us. As you mash representative. Like your sanity depends on it. Politically, she's the metaphorical red light at every intersection of truth. Ask a direct question, and she channels the ancient art of circular talking, delivering answers that spin so hard they could power a wind farm. It's less communication, more performance art and evasion, and everyone's stuck in the loop.
Yeah, you couldn't keep up with Joe. Sorry, Joe couldn't keep up with FDR in the 100-yard dash. And I'm talking right now. Damn. But she expected us to believe she couldn't keep up with the guy who had to have an electric fence put up around the White House so he wouldn't in a neighbor's yard.
And hats off to Greg Gutfeld, who walked in armed with nothing but razor-sharp sarcasm and a working frontal lobe, basically the two elements that send Karine Jean-Pierre into full Windows XP reboot mode. Ask for clarity, and she crashes like dial up in a thunderstorm. When it comes to delivering actual information, she's about as reliable as a glitchy weather app and moves with the urgency of a DMV clerk 2 minutes into their lunch break.
So was Karine too dumb to notice Biden was a mess, or was she just dishonest? Pick your poison, moron or mercenary. Now there's a great name for her book. I'm going with mercenary, because this whole book tour didn't spring from a burst of guilt. According to Politico, she was copying her publicist on emails while still press secretary. So she was planning this from the podium. She's like a pilot who puts on his parachute and oxygen mask while your plane's leaving the airport.
Credit where it's due when it comes to dodging questions. Karine Jean-Pierre is in a league of her own. If avoiding accountability were an Olympic event, she'd have more gold than Michael Phelps and enough world records to retire with a Wikipedia page titled Deflection Queen. All it took was Greg Gutfeld lighting a single sarcastic match, and she practically self-combusted. No shouting, no grandstanding, just a well-timed smirk and the occasional side eye that said more than any monologue could. You don't need to fact-check Karine, you just need to check if any of her sentences have a landing point. Spoiler, they don't. Half the time, you're left wondering if she's answering the question or reciting abstract poetry in real time. At one point, it felt like she was one breath away from quoting SpongeBob as a credible source. Watching her spiral was like someone trying to explain cryptocurrency to a houseplant. No clarity, no logic, and somehow everyone's IQ drops by the end. You'd think that after months of mixing up inflation with climate policy, border security, and whatever buzzword is trending that week, she'd come up with a new strategy. But no, she sticks to the classics: dodge, pivot, blame the last administration, toss in a few key phrases, and hope nobody follows up. She's like a human magic 8-ball. Give her a shake, hope for coherence, and prepare for disappointment. Gutfeld didn't need cue cards, her performance was the punchline. Her job is communication, yet she has the verbal agility of a malfunctioning toaster. Each response is like a hamster trying to solve a Rubik's Cube, frantic, confused, and stuck in place.
In a crisis of faith, it was a business plan. She didn't leave the Democrat Party. She managed her exit like Pelosi dumping stocks before she signs the corporate tax hike. She was even pining for a spot on The View, which is like angling for the best seat in a garbage truck. But she didn't get the gig, probably because she refused their lunch bucket of thawed mackerel. That's what you feed the talent at SeaWorld.
Let's not kid ourselves, this isn't new. Karine Jean-Pierre has been ducking accountability since her very first day at the podium. If evasion were a profession, she'd be the CEO, operating under the alias "not my job" in some bureaucratic version of witness protection. Her idea of prep? Probably tossing on a pair of glasses for the illusion of credibility, then stapling together random charts like she's prepping for a TED Talk in a parallel universe where facts are optional and coherence is a luxury. And what does she consistently bring to the table? A binder? No, the binder. A monstrosity so oversized it might qualify for its own government funding or at least its own zip code. But every time she opens it, it's like reading the back of a shampoo bottle. Vague, baffling, and you're left wondering what any of it has to do with the question asked. Gutfeld probably looked at that binder and assumed she was moonlighting as a gas station librarian. What makes it worse? Gutfeld didn't even need to exaggerate. The comedy writes itself. Karine declared the border secure while the footage looked like a deleted scene from The Walking Dead. She claimed the economy was booming on the same day people were comparing egg prices to iPhone installments. At this point, reality isn't something she grapples with, it's more like a distant cousin she occasionally acknowledges with a polite wave from across the metaphysical family reunion.
Even the most reliable lefties are roasting her, but it serves him right. After all, she was their pick, a historic first. Black, lesbian, and board certified by visiting angels. But you know it's bad when DC operatives call it a grift. Hell, that's like Taylor Swift calling you a 6. But they say that she was ineffectual, unprepared, needed to be coddled, and couldn't manage a team. What's that sound like? DEI. What happens when you hire someone based on identity and not merit?
And oh, the excuse is sweet. Exhausted democracy. The excuses. In Karine Jean-Pierre's world, nothing is ever her fault. If a meteor leveled DC, tomorrow she'd blame climate change, systemic oppression, the Supreme Court, and somehow Greg Gutfeld's eyebrows, probably in that order. Watching her redirect blame is like watching a toddler insist the crayon acted alone while standing next to a wall covered in stick figures and glitter glue. Meanwhile, Gutfeld, ever the patient sadist, didn't interrupt. He didn't have to. He just leaned back, smirking, as she unraveled in real time, layering buzzwords and half-answers into a word salad so dense and flavorless, even the most devoted vegan would push the plate away. You don't debate Karine, you just let her talk. Long enough and she'll build her own rhetorical sinkhole, then jump right in. And the best part, she still struts like she's winning the room. Sis, you're not even winning your own binder. Every tab you flip feels like a new entry in the official handbook of how not to be a press secretary. Honestly, she could publish that thing and title it 50 Shades of Spin, with a foreword written by the ghost of Orwell. Gutfeld didn't even need to raise his voice because the whole performance played out like a satire skit that wrote itself. Karine Jean-Pierre is the only person who can turn a simple yes or no into a multi-episode docuseries, complete with side plots, flashbacks, and no clear resolution. Her talking points loop so tightly, even Google Maps would throw up its hands and say, "You're on your own."
Personally, I think what was the toughest thing to see in the 3 weeks was there was a disconnect for me. What was happening with leadership in the Democratic Party and how it was truly, as my former colleague, communications director Ben LeBolt said, it was a firing squad, and I had never seen anything like it.
And let's not overlook the smug confidence, the kind of misplaced bravado that only comes from mistaking memo reading for crisis management. Her expression during those press briefings radiates, "Don't worry, I've got this." Meanwhile, her answers scream, "Error 404, policy not found." Greg Gutfeld didn't have to dismantle her with hard-hitting facts. She collapsed under the sheer weight of her own contradictions. At one point, she tried to explain inflation using a metaphor about kitchen tables and family dinners. Because, apparently, when the economy's in freefall, what Americans really need is a bedtime story. Little Timmy can't afford apple juice because of Republican greed. Compelling stuff. Now do gas prices and explain why a fill-up feels like signing a lease. Through it all, Gutfeld just smirked like a man watching a magician fail at every trick. Drop the cards, lose the rabbit, forget the wand, it was all there. And who could blame him? Every sentence from Karine feels like a firework of failure. Flashy, noisy, and gone in seconds without substance. She's not the press secretary anymore, she's the excuse secretary. Her entire strategy is built on the hope that if she talks long enough, with enough buzzwords and recycled phrases, we'll forget what the original question was. And sometimes, it works only because most of us are still sitting there, trying to decode whether she's actually speaking English or just pulling randomized phrases from a political Mad Libs generator.
He has done more to secure the border and to deal with this issue of immigration than anybody else. He really has.
There's a word for that. Pathological.
And then there are her inspirational moments, those fleeting attempts to summon Obama-level gravitas, only to end up sounding like someone reading a cereal box aloud with the passion of a Shakespearean understudy. Today, we reaffirm our commitment to communities, and strength, and equity, and, windows. Next question. It's not leadership, it's Mad Libs with a teleprompter. Greg Gutfeld didn't bring heat to that briefing, he brought a mirror. And what stared back wasn't fire, but a cringe-inducing reflection of pure, unfiltered incompetence. If cluelessness had a face, it would be hers, framed by that tight, uncomfortable smile she wears like armor anytime someone mentions Ukraine, immigration, or anything that demands an actual answer. What's truly staggering is she seems to think it's going well. Like the string quartet on the Titanic, she's delivering press room solos while the ship takes on water. Gutfeld didn't even need to argue, he simply pointed at the lifeboats while she tried to plug gaping holes in credibility with buzzwords and blind optimism. And the press? They just nod along, as if her verbal Jenga tower isn't collapsing every few minutes in a puff of confusing statements, half-formed metaphors, and policy gibberish that wouldn't pass a high school debate.
To stop thinking in boxes. But as a black, lesbian, French, Haitian female, she checks more boxes than a gynecologist.
On the order form.
On the order form.
Oh my God.
All those applications you gotta fill out.
That's the thing.
What, you think I meant vaginas?
Ew.
Disgusting people. But now now everyone says she's incompetent and lazy. You know, after they called me racist for saying that. That's not why I'm racist.
Nope.
Greg Gutfeld doesn't need a debate stage. He doesn't even need a panel or a script. Just hand him a single clip of Karine Jean-Pierre at the podium, and the absurdity writes itself. Her briefings are less press conference and more interpretive. Performance art, like watching someone try to reboot a frozen laptop by aggressively whispering affirmations at it. Her approach to crisis management resembles a keyboard shortcut gone wrong. Control plus Alt plus Delete plus a shrug. When criticism comes her way, the response is classic Cold War defense. Duck and cover, with a dash of buzzword bingo. Her version of a bold stance, rewording "we stand firmly committed" for the 10th time, like she's rearranging motivational fridge magnets. It's not conviction, it's copy-paste courage. She's the human equivalent of buffering. You ask a question, wait 7 painfully long seconds, and still get nothing but the spinning wheel of generic, scripted phrases. Gutfeld didn't need to tear her apart. She strolled into the room with a box of metaphorical marshmallows, doused herself in lighter fluid, and struck the match with a smile. If this administration were a sitcom, Karine would be the side character who walks in, drops a confusing info dump about subplots nobody's following, then trips over the coffee table on the way out. And Gutfeld? He's the live studio laugh track, no post-production needed. He just watches, smirks, and occasionally points at the circus, knowing full well that she'll juggle herself into oblivion without any help. This isn't political theater anymore, it's political karaoke. And Karine keeps choosing the same off-key track, forgetting the lyrics halfway through, then doubling down as if the problem is the microphone. Each press conference plays out like a choose-your-own-adventure novel written by someone who's never finished a chapter, let alone a coherent thought. Greg didn't need preparation. Karine came pre-clowned. Her answers aren't just spun, they're hurled into a blender, set to high, and poured out over the audience in a frothy mess of confusion and misplaced confidence. But let's be honest, this isn't even about political ideology anymore. It's about basic competence. And Karine Jean-Pierre has the political instincts of a potato in a tuxedo. Sure, it may look the part from a distance, but try cutting into it and you'll find no substance, just starch and styling. Gutfeld, armed with little more than sarcasm and a functioning grip on reality, didn't need to destroy her. He just watched as she pulled off her greatest illusion yet, pretending she had credibility left to torch. It wasn't a takedown, it was a wake. The only thing in the coffin? Every real answer she's avoided since day one. At this point, her briefings have become avant-garde performances, surreal displays of political interpretive dance, set against the foggy backdrop of bureaucratic confusion. She tosses out riddles, half-truths, and metaphors so mangled, they'd send a fortune cookie into retirement. Ask her about the border, and you'll get a speech on infrastructure. Bring up inflation, and she'll pivot into a story about equity. In sustainable lemon farming, he didn't destroy her. He simply held up the mirror. And what stared back wasn't leadership, it was a mascot for institutional confusion, dressed up in talking points and held together by sheer, unwavering delusion.